There is a moment in every person's life when the noise becomes unbearable. Not the noise outside, but the noise within. The constant need to respond, to defend, to prove, to explain, to correct the way others see you, to protect yourself from every careless word and every silent judgment. You tell yourself you are strong because you endure it, because you fight back, because you survive. But survival is loud. It is reactive. It is desperate. And somewhere deep down, beneath the performance, you begin to feel tired. Tired of reacting. Tired of being pulled by invisible strings. Tired of feeling that your emotional state is somehow dependent on the temperature of the room you walk into. You begin to wonder what it would feel like to be unshaken, to be untouchable, to carry something inside you that does not tremble every time the world shifts. And that is where the journey toward becoming dangerous in silence begins. Most people misunderstand what danger truly means. They think it is aggression. They think it is dominance. They imagine a person who intimidates others, who speaks with force, who commands attention through sheer volume. But the most dangerous people you will ever meet rarely raise their voices. They do not argue to win. They do not rush to prove their intelligence. They do not chase validation like oxygen. They sit in a room, and their presence alone feels grounded, controlled, immovable. They are not loud because they do not need to be. Their strength does not leak through reaction. It rests quietly within them, like a deep ocean beneath a calm surface. And what makes them dangerous is not that they seek to harm. It is that they cannot be controlled. Carl Jung once said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Most people never pause long enough to understand what that truly means. They move through life, reacting to every trigger, every insecurity, every unresolved wound that lies buried beneath their awareness. A careless comment ruins their day. A rejection reshapes their self-worth. A betrayal defines their identity. They believe the world is happening to them, unaware that what truly governs their emotional storms are fragments of themselves they have never faced. They suppress anger because they fear it makes them bad. They deny jealousy because they want to be good. They bury shame because they cannot bear to look at it. And yet, all these rejected pieces do not disappear. They grow in the dark. They wait. They influence decisions. They distort perception. They speak through sudden reactions and irrational fears. And the person wonders why they feel so powerless. To become dangerous in silence is not to silence emotion. It is to confront it so deeply that it no longer controls you. It is to sit alone with the parts of yourself you have spent years avoiding. The insecurity that whispers you are not enough. The envy that stings when someone else succeeds. The rage that rises when you feel disrespected. The fear that tightens your chest when you sense abandonment. Most people run from these experiences. They distract themselves. They scroll, they argue, they stay busy. They pretend they are unaffected. But the one who becomes dangerous chooses differently. They sit with the discomfort. They allow it to surface. They observe it without judgment. And slowly, something begins to change. When you stop running from your shadow, it loses the power to chase you. Jung described the shadow as the parts of ourselves we reject, the traits we deem unacceptable, the impulses we suppress in order to fit into society's expectations. But the shadow is not evil. It is unacknowledged potential. It contains anger that can become boundaries. It contains fear that can become awareness. It contains ambition that can become purpose. When you deny these elements, They act unconsciously. When you integrate them, they become strength. The person who has integrated their shadow no longer reacts impulsively because they understand the source of their reactions. They no longer feel ashamed of their darker impulses because they have brought them into the light. They have ownership over their internal landscape, and ownership creates stability. Right here is where most people turn back. This is the uncomfortable part. The confrontation, the self-honesty. And if you are still listening, if this is resonating deeper than surface motivation, then you are not here by accident. If you find this kind of psychological depth valuable, subscribe to the channel. This space is for those who are serious about mastering their inner world, not just consuming noise. The journey only gets deeper from here. Imagine walking into a room where criticism is being thrown carelessly. Most people tense up immediately. Their posture shifts. Their mind begins to calculate how to defend itself. But the one who has done the inner work listens calmly. They are not numb. They are aware. They examine whether the criticism touches a truth they have already accepted within themselves. If it does, they adjust without collapsing. If it does not, they let it pass without absorbing it. There is no frantic need to retaliate because there is nothing fragile left to protect. That is silent danger, the inability to be emotionally hijacked. Becoming dangerous in silence is a process of subtraction rather than addition. It is not about acquiring new techniques to manipulate others. It is about removing the unconscious patterns that make you predictable. When someone insults you and you explode, they have controlled you. When someone withdraws affection and you panic, they have controlled you. When someone withholds validation and you feel diminished, they have controlled you. But when you understand your triggers so intimately that they no longer dictate your behavior, you become free. And freedom is unpredictable. You respond rather than react. You choose rather than collapse. You observe rather than chase. And this quiet choice unsettles those who are accustomed to controlling through emotional pressure. There is a loneliness that accompanies this transformation. As you grow more aware, you begin to notice how much of the world operates unconsciously. Conversations filled with projection. Arguments fueled by unacknowledged insecurity. Relationships built on mutual validation rather than mutual growth. You begin to see the masks people wear because you have removed your own. And there is a temptation to feel superior, to retreat into judgment. But true integration includes humility. You understand that you too once operated from that unconscious place. You recognize that awareness is not a weapon against others, but a shield for yourself. And so you remain quiet. Not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. Silence becomes your training ground. In silence, you confront the thoughts you once avoided. You question your motives. You examine your fears. You watch the patterns of your mind as they arise and dissolve. It is uncomfortable at first. Without distraction, the mind reveals its chaos. Old memories surface. Regrets whisper. Fantasies exaggerate. But if you stay long enough, something steadier emerges. You begin to notice that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness observing them. And that distinction changes everything. Over time, you begin to notice subtle changes. The insults that once pierced you now glance off your awareness. The manipulations that once entangled you now reveal themselves clearly. The environments that once drained you no longer hold the same power. You move differently. You speak with intention. You listen more than you talk. And people begin to sense that there is something beneath your calm, something steady and deliberate. Eventually, you realize that silence is not emptiness. It is fullness. It is the space where you meet yourself without distraction. It is where you build resilience that does not need validation. It is where you cultivate a power that does not require recognition. And as you continue walking this path, you understand that becoming dangerous in silence is not about changing the world's perception of you. It is about changing your relationship with yourself. The most dangerous person in the room is not the loudest. It is the one who has nothing to prove, nothing to hide, and nothing to fear within themselves. It is the one who has walked through their own darkness and emerged with clarity. It is the one who can sit in silence without needing to fill it. And when you become that person, you will notice that the world may still test you, but it can no longer control you. If this message has shifted something in you, even slightly, subscribe now. Not for entertainment, but for evolution. This channel is for those who refuse to stay reactive, who refuse to live unconsciously, who are ready to build real psychological strength. Stay with this journey. The next step is always deeper. You will still feel pain. You will still experience loss. You will still encounter conflict. But you will not be shaken at your core. You will not abandon yourself in moments of pressure. You will not betray your values for temporary approval. And in that unwavering alignment with your true self, you will discover a strength that does not need to announce itself. You will simply be calm, aware, unmoved, dangerous. Because the truth is, the real test of silent danger does not happen in meditation rooms or during quiet reflection. It happens in the moments when your old self would have reacted without thinking. It happens when someone tries to provoke you, when they question your worth, when they attempt to undermine you in front of others, when they withdraw affection to see if you will chase. That is where the work either holds or collapses. In the past, you would have felt it immediately. That tightening in the chest, the rush of heat behind the eyes, the impulse to defend yourself, to correct the narrative, to reassert your position. Your nervous system would have taken control before your awareness even had a chance to step in. But now something different happens. There is a pause, a gap, a moment of space between stimulus and response. And inside that space, you observe. You notice the anger rising, but you do not become it. You notice the insecurity whispering, but you do not obey it. You notice the ego wanting to strike back, but you do not feed it. And in that single pause, you reclaim power. Most people never experience that pause. Their emotions fire, and they follow. They believe their reactions are justified because they feel real. But feeling real does not mean being true. The unconscious does not ask for permission before acting. It simply repeats what it has always done. And that is why so many lives follow the same painful patterns, the same toxic relationships, the same self-sabotage, the same cycles of blame. But when you begin to live consciously, you interrupt the cycle. You see the pattern forming before it completes itself. You recognize the familiar emotional script trying to take over. And instead of performing it, you let it dissolve. That is silent power. It does not need witnesses. It does not require applause. It is an internal victory that no one else may even notice. But you will feel it. And that feeling is different from validation. It is steadiness. If you are still here, still reflecting instead of reacting, then this is not casual listening. It means something in you wants depth, not noise. If this kind of psychological work resonates with you, subscribe now and stay with this journey. Because this transformation does not happen in one video. It happens through repetition, awareness, and commitment. There is something deeply unsettling about a person who cannot be emotionally manipulated. When someone tries to bait you and you remain calm, it exposes their strategy. When someone attempts to control you through withdrawal and you remain composed, it reveals their insecurity. When someone expects you to collapse under pressure and you remain centered, it disrupts their expectations. Your silence becomes a mirror, and not everyone is comfortable seeing themselves reflected clearly. But understand this: becoming dangerous in silence is not about intimidating others. It is about being immovable from within. It is about building such deep self-knowledge that no external force can fracture you. And that depth is earned through confrontation with yourself. There will be nights when old memories surface unexpectedly. Moments you thought you had buried, words that wounded you years ago, failures that still echo quietly in the back of your mind. Instead of pushing them away, you sit with them. You examine them. You ask yourself why they still carry weight. And slowly, you begin to see that the pain was never just about the event. It was about what the event confirmed inside you. A fear of not being enough. A belief that you were unworthy. A narrative that you had unconsciously accepted. When you bring that narrative into the light, it weakens. Because darkness thrives in secrecy. But awareness dissolves secrecy. And the more aware you become, the less your past controls your present. This is what Jung meant when he spoke about individuation. It is not self-improvement in the superficial sense. It is not about polishing your image or mastering techniques. It is about integration, about becoming whole, about allowing the light and the shadow within you to coexist without conflict. When you stop dividing yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts, you stop living in internal war. And internal peace is not soft. It is powerful. People often mistake softness for weakness and aggression for strength. But aggression is often fear in disguise. Loud dominance is often insecurity amplified. The person who truly knows themselves does not need to perform power. They radiate it naturally. Their words are measured. Their boundaries are firm but not cruel. Their presence is steady. And because they are not seeking to extract validation from others, they are not easily provoked. Imagine walking away from a conversation without replaying it 100 times in your mind. Imagine receiving criticism and calmly extracting what is useful without spiraling into self-doubt. Imagine someone attempting to undermine you and feeling no urgency to prove them wrong. That is not indifference. That is mastery. It is the quiet confidence of someone who has faced their internal shadows and no longer fears them. There is a moment in this journey when you realize something profound. You have been your own greatest adversary. The world may have wounded you, yes, but your resistance to those wounds prolonged the suffering. Your refusal to examine your unconscious patterns kept you trapped. When you finally take responsibility for your internal world, you stop waiting for the external world to change. And responsibility is liberating. Because if your suffering is entirely caused by others, then you are powerless. But if your suffering is amplified by unconscious wounds within you, then you have agency. You can heal, you can integrate, you can transform. That realization alone shifts your posture in life. You stand differently. You speak differently. You move through conflict differently. You begin to choose your battles carefully. Not because you are afraid, but because you understand that not every provocation deserves your energy. Silence becomes selective, not passive. You are quiet not because you have nothing to say, but because you do not waste words where they hold no value. There is an economy to your reactions, a discipline to your emotional expenditure. Over time, your relationships change. Some people drift away. They were accustomed to the reactive version of you, the one who chased, who defended, who over-explained. When that version disappears, the dynamic shifts. Some cannot adapt, and that is painful. But growth often requires distance, not from love, but from patterns that no longer align with who you are becoming. New connections form slowly, people who value depth over drama, conversations that stretch into meaning rather than competition, interactions that feel grounded rather than chaotic. You begin to notice that your inner stability attracts stability. Your calm invites calm. And while you do not seek validation, you find that respect arrives naturally. There will still be moments of doubt. Growth is not linear. There will be days when you question whether the silence makes you invisible, whether your restraint is mistaken for weakness, whether you should speak louder, assert harder, dominate more obviously. In those moments, you return to awareness. You ask yourself whether the impulse to prove is coming from clarity or from ego. And more often than not, you will find that silence holds greater power, because the loudest display of strength is often the most fragile. It demands constant reinforcement, constant attention, constant defense. But quiet strength sustains itself. It does not require an audience. It is rooted in something deeper than perception. To become dangerous in silence is to cultivate a mind that cannot be easily penetrated by chaos. It is to observe without absorbing, to feel without drowning, to engage without losing yourself. And this cultivation is not mystical. It is practical. It is built through reflection, through conscious response, through deliberate pauses. It is strengthened each time you choose understanding over reaction. Eventually, you reach a point where external validation feels unnecessary. Not because you reject connection, but because your worth no longer fluctuates with opinion. You still value feedback. You still listen. But you are not defined by it. Your identity rests in self-knowledge, not in applause. And that is when something remarkable happens. You stop fearing loss. You stop fearing rejection. You stop fearing judgment. Not because these things no longer occur, but because they no longer threaten your core. You understand that pain is part of life, but you also understand that you have the internal capacity to withstand it. That knowledge frees you, and freedom is unpredictable. It cannot be coerced. It cannot be intimidated. When you walk into a room now, you do not scan for approval. You do not brace for criticism. You are present, fully, calmly. Your attention is not fragmented by insecurity, and that presence is felt. It is subtle, but it is unmistakable. It is the energy of someone who has faced themselves and emerged integrated. Becoming dangerous in silence is not a destination. It is a continuous practice of awareness. It is waking up each day and choosing consciousness over autopilot. It is noticing when your ego flares and gently redirecting it. It is recognizing when fear whispers and responding with clarity instead of panic. There is no grand announcement when you arrive at this state. No ceremony, no applause. Just a quiet realization one day that you are no longer easily shaken, that the storms which once dismantled you now pass through without destruction, that the triggers which once controlled you now reveal themselves before they act. And in that quiet realization, you understand something profound. The world did not change. You did. You integrated what you once feared. You faced what you once avoided. You accepted what you once rejected. And in doing so, you became whole. The most dangerous person in any environment is the one who cannot be internally divided, the one whose shadow is acknowledged, the one whose ego is observed rather than obeyed, the one who has nothing to prove because they have nothing to hide. You do not need to announce your transformation. You do not need to intimidate to be respected. You do not need to dominate to be powerful. You simply remain centered. And that center is unshakable. If this journey toward inner mastery speaks to you, subscribe and continue walking it with us. Real strength is built layer by layer, awareness by awareness. And the deeper you go, the less the world can control you. That is what it means to become dangerous in silence.